Welcome to From Clinical to Entrepreneurial, OT Private Practice Journeys, an Ontario Society of Occupational Therapists podcast. In this series, we connect with occupational therapists, private practitioners, and business owners, and we hear about their inspiration, their stories, and their lessons learned. I'm Seema Sandwani, OSOT's Director of Strategic Partnerships and Practice. In episode 3, my co-host Shari and I speak with Shauna Eisen, who has just celebrated her first year in private practice. Shauna, an OT with 10 years experience, shares the steps of starting a practice, how she balanced startup expenses, networking, and building systems, and what she's learned about defining a sustainable caseload. If you've been thinking about launching your own practice but aren't sure where to start, Shauna's insights will help you do the math, plan for safety nets, and build your business with confidence. Enjoy. Hello, Shauna.
Hello.
It is great to have you with us. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and to have this conversation with you all.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited. So let's jump right in. I know we've got lots of questions around the entrepreneurship piece, but before we launch into that, we want to know a little bit about you. So tell us about you, Shauna. Where did you do your occupational therapy degree? How long have you been in OT? Get us started so we can learn a little bit about you.
Sure. So I did my OT degree at Queen's a little over 10 years ago, hard to believe. And so that's about how long I've been practicing. I've practiced in a few different areas, everything from schools and clinics and hospitals, community organizations, pediatrics, mental health.
Oh my gosh, you did a lot in 10 years.
A bunch of different things. And, part of it, to be honest, was the climate of the profession when I graduated is a lot of us were kind of puzzle piecing a little bit. When I started, I had, I think, 4 different roles, including a research role at U of T. And, it was, you had to get a little creative
Really?
to find your footing.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh, when I graduated, I was getting random emails from people I'd never even spoken to saying, "Hey, you want a job?"
Oh,
Yeah, it
those
was a different time.
those
Yeah.
emails were not there 10 years ago, and
Wow, so interesting. I think
yes,
those emails are back right now.
they are
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
It was an unfortunate time, and I so respect and admire many of my colleagues who I graduated with. They were working in very non-OT roles and had to take a beat and work in restaurants, and
Wow.
Really?
it was a
Huh.
tricky time for OTs when I graduated. But one of those things, puzzle piecing, as I like to say, is I learned a lot very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of my, little bit of my OT background history. A big chunk of my career, for about 7 years, I was at Canadian Mental Health Association, York Region South Simcoe, which I still fondly think of my CMHA family. I was there for 7 years in 4 different roles, both direct service and management, where I learned a lot about that, direct service, but also that program level, system level piece around OT. And just about a year ago, celebrating my 1-year anniversary, I began my private practice, Songbird Occupational Therapy, and that has been an amazing journey so far.
So what brought you to starting your private practice?
Oh, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? As I mentioned, I love my CMHA family and learned so much there. And it really was this personal pull that it was time to start a new chapter. And it was interesting because I think I fought that pull a little bit because I love the people I work with. I love the work that I was doing. But there was this part of me that felt it was time for a change. I had been doing management. I was the manager of a few programs. I became director of services for the homelessness program at CMHA, which really valuable and important work. But I was starting to feel a bit removed from the impact. Being in that management
Yeah.
piece. And while I love program design and planning and that big picture, I really miss working one-on-one with clients and families. And I thought, I think it's time to go back a bit to my OT roots in that way. And I will actually give OSOT some credit here in part of that journey. And I think I mentioned this to Seema a little while ago. It was at the OSOT conference, not this past one, but the year before, where I was in this feeling a little lost, not sure what to do. And that's sort of what inspired me to go to the conference for the first time in a few years to kind of re-engage and re-inspire my OT spirit. And it really did just that. I connected with a lot of people and talked to them about sort of what I was thinking and feeling. And I left there sort of re-energized to begin this new chapter.
So you knew you wanted to change, but there's a lot of different ways to change. So what brought you to specifically you're going to have your own practice?
Yeah.
And are you, sorry, I'll back up too. Are you full-time with your own practice?
Yeah.
So you left your job and you went all in with your new practice.
I did. I took a leap. It was absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, I think I had thought a lot about, well, what would I like to do? And I think being in management and in leadership for so long, the thought for myself to then work in direct service in an organization that then I would essentially be working for someone else would feel a little disjointed for me. And I could see myself personally getting frustrated and thinking, oh, well, maybe I should do that role, and almost being tempted to shift in that way. And I thought, doing private practice, I would get to be able to do the direct service, but also still be able to engage in a lot of my leadership and management skills and abilities in managing an actual practice. And so I thought, something about all of that felt clear that if I'm going to go back to direct service, it's kind of got to be just for myself.
The flexibility.
And
And
I
the
think,
self-determination.
And the control a little, like it's yours.
I think it is. I think it's the control, and just in this way, I kind of get to do it all, really, all those pieces.
So how did you, okay, many questions. The theme of the podcast, I have so many questions. So I guess I'll start first, the financial piece, and then I'd really love to hear like what you set up in line, sort of legally and so on. Because, I just started. I had no plans. Well, I did have a plan. I was going to do 10 hours a week to 15 hours a week, and that was going to be it. And that didn't work out. But I was in a fortunate position where my husband had a full-time job, so I knew that we had a steady income while I was building things. We've had other guests who've told us, no, I took out a loan, I went all in and I did it. How did you get started from a financial perspective?
Absolutely. And I will give so much credit to my husband, who was always incredibly supportive, and whatever you want to do, I support you 110%. And he's been like that ever since we've been together. And I appreciate that so much. And we had talked about it, and we had said, let's look at what this would mean. What does our savings look like? What is worst case scenario if it takes this long to set this up? What might I charge? How many clients am I looking to have? All these types of pieces. Yeah.
So I'm going to back you up because you said a lot of things that a lot of people actually specifically want to be like, okay, but what's the math?
Yes. Yes.
So can you go into that? I know we're sort of digressing already from the next topic, but
let's jump right into the math. And so I said to myself, okay, I have a little bit of savings, not a lot, really, honestly, not a lot.
Yeah.
A little bit of savings. What are our expenses? We have our mortgage, we have our, we really want to look at our monthly expenses and say, okay. And so we sort of saw, like, say I don't see one client for 6 months. Say I don't contribute at all for 6 months.
Right.
Will we be okay? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
And so I thought, we both sort of looked at that and thought, I think that's a pretty good conservative benchmark, because it's very unlikely that I won't see one client for 6 months, right? And then the goal was that I would have a full caseload within 1 year.
And what do you consider a full caseload?
So, and that is something.
How many billable hours? Sorry.
Let's get right into it. And I laugh because it's still something, and you'll hear me talk about this throughout our conversation, that's dynamic. and I'm
Mhm.
constantly figuring out that balance.
Oh, for
I'm
sure.
constantly reflecting. And
Yeah, is
so,
this full or is that
yes,
now is it full, right? Right.
yes.
Yeah.
And I even
Yeah.
had points we can talk about later where I got too full and I actually had to pull
Yeah.
back and I had wait lists. That. So right now, in this very moment on January 9th, 2025, my full caseload has more to do with my weekly visits than the number of clients. And so I
Mm-hmm.
actually make a chart and I sort of say, who's weekly, who's bi-weekly, who's occasional, etc. And right now I aim for just 10 visits a week.
Okay.
And that's where I'm at right now. And I'm exploring different things, especially as I gear into seeing some clients virtually, as I'm shifting my catchment area and I'm narrowing that down if that's going to increase. But we had decided that, if I can do 10 visits a week financially, that would keep us going in an okay space that we were comfortable with. And so that was sort of an informal goal.
Okay, so you kind of reversed engineered where you were like, this is the income I need to
Yeah.
support our finances.
Yeah.
So then let's break that down because I did something not when I started, but when my husband joined my practice, we were like, okay, you need this many clients to match your previous salary per week.
Yes.
And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, that's achievable. So that's actually calming because sometimes when you think it back in terms of I need 10 clients to make this work per week. That's
Mm-hmm.
achievable. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you think I need to make what, $80,000 a year, you're like, ooh, right? Because it's
Right.
harder to go to such a big number. So Shauna, then did you fully leave your other practice and restart? Like, did you have a parachute and a safety net or did you just go?
I took a leap. It really was when I sort of gave my notice, I knew what I was going to do. We had made those plans. And then I had terminated my contract. Again, left on great terms, still called them my CMHA family and had so much support from everyone knowing that I was moving on to this new chapter. And I think, before I sort of had my final day, I started doing some things in the background, and we can
Yep.
talk a little bit about what that looked like. But yeah, before I had my first client, it was sort of like ending one role, I had my last day, and then I had my first client.
Well, take us
Okay.
through that. I mean, you take us through what were some of those things you started to do in the background. I mean, and then it's here you go. You need to build a caseload. You need to start promoting. You need to start what's your, all
Yeah,
of that. So tell us about those background pieces and how you started to then see your private clients.
absolutely. And I think this is really like if it were me and I was listening to this podcast, this is the part where I would lean into.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to give as much of like the juicy information as possible.
Awesome.
So where did I start? Well, my type A personality went into play, got my spreadsheet going and really started making a list. What do I need to do? Right. And like everything from I need to create a website, right? I need to have that sort of piece where it says what I'm going to offer. It's going to put what I'm all about. Um, I connected with a lot of professionals. So I connected with my small business center, which was really helpful because they do free virtual meetings. You can connect with them anytime. They can connect you with other resources. And I just sort of talked with them about, the sole proprietor versus incorporation. What else is there anything else I need to do? Registering my business name. And then even, connecting with an accountant and talking about opening a business account and
So
how do I
Shauna, I'm just
yes
going to stop for one
Yeah.
second.
yeah
When you were talking about connecting with the small business center, I think what you're talking about is sort of those locally run business communities. Like, so for example, in Ottawa, there's Invest Ottawa, and there are different companies like that. Is that what you're talking about? Where
so the
they actually have
small
educational resources for
yeah
people?
so the small business center, it's like a province-wide initiative and they
Okay.
have local offices all around the province. So I went to my local one here in Barrie. And it's completely free. They do
Yep.
education, they do consultation, and they're really for any small businesses that just want to understand what it takes to start up. And they have those resources. Again, it's free. You just go and
That's
Google
great.
it.
Yeah.
And my accountant actually told me about it. Like, hey, make sure you connect with your small business center.
And how did you choose your accountant? Or did you already have an accountant?
Yes. So I have a family friend who
Okay.
is an accountant, who I kind of asked, where I should go. And she connected me with some other people who are more specialized in small business and those types of areas as well. And I think what was helpful along, if we're looking at like that financial realm, is when I connected with the accountant, connected with the small business center, and then also connected with sort of like the CRA, and they
Mhm.
also have some free consultation for people who are starting businesses. And I actually connected, and they'll walk you through how to do taxes
Yeah.
as a small business owner,
Yeah.
right?
They do actually offer some good services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that, you take an hour, do a webinar or connect with them, ask your questions. They're very kind, very supportive. And I felt that really helped me set myself up. That was one of the things I did really well. I will say, if someone's saying, okay, I need to start a new business, I need to start a new practice, how do I start? Register your name, register your business,
Yep.
right? And open up a free business account. There are free ones where it's completely separate. So all of
Do you mean banking? A free
my banking
business
account,
account at your
yes,
bank?
yeah,
Yeah.
bank
Yeah.
business account. You open that up under your registered name. And then I have, for myself, I have my checking and saving under there. So all of my payment for my clients go directly to my checking. And then every time before I pay myself, I take 20% and I put it in the savings, and it stays there because, again, I've only been in business for a year. I don't know what my taxes are going to be. And so I wanted to be really conservative, and I, spoke with CRA and all those sorts of pieces. I'm putting that 20%. If I get some of that back, amazing, right? But
Yeah.
at least I have that sort of fail safe. And that's just the process I have. So I pay myself once a week from that account.
So then it's a sole proprietorship?
Yes,
Okay.
it's the sole proprietor. I spoke with a few different people about that. And from my perspective, as by myself, especially, I don't have a physical space. So I'm 100% community based, right? So I don't really have those sort of like insurance liabilities and all those sorts of pieces. It makes sense for me. Now, if I were to later on down the road hire, say, an OTA or admin support or have a physical space, I think I would shift into incorporation. But for now, I think sole proprietor makes a lot of sense for me.
Okay, so do you pay yourself a fixed amount, or is it sort of you put aside 20% of whatever you have, and then whatever's remaining is your income?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do every week. It's sort of like I pay myself every week.
Okay.
And on Friday, I go into the account and I transfer to the savings of 20%, and then the rest I send to myself, and that's my paycheck.
Okay. So you did a lot of this setup, all of that background admin, but now we've got sort of the daily operations, right? Because now you're first, I guess we've got the question about marketing, but then we also want to know, well, you're invoicing and
Mm-hmm.
you're getting money from clients and you have to follow up with them. So, what software tools and resources are you using for that kind of stuff?
Oh, 100%. And that was part of that early piece. I knew I needed a website, I needed to register my business, and I needed practice management software. 100%.
Yeah.
I truly, in this day and age, I don't see why anyone wouldn't do that.
Could
It's,
you take
yeah.
a step back and just explain to the group of people who are listening what you are what when we've talked about practice management software before, but can you specifically speak to what that is?
Absolutely. So practice management software is a program, and you pay a fee, pretty reasonable fee, and it helps you organize your clients, your schedule, your billing, does the invoicing, and charting, all those pieces, right? So for example, when I first, and if we're talking about the day to day, if I take on a new client, right, I make a profile in this system that's online,
And
right?
which one are you using?
So I use Jane,
Yeah.
and I did some trials with a few different companies, and just found that Jane was really comprehensive. I also really like that a lot of people use Jane. So a
It's
lot of
everywhere
clients that
right
I
now, yeah.
have,
They're
they've
familiar with it.
already are using Jane for their massage
Right.
therapist or
Right.
this
Yeah.
or that.
Right.
So I thought it was just really comprehensive. I really enjoyed it. And so, I have my client profile, all their information, their contact information. I can give them permission to do bookings. I can do bookings. I can also pull reports, see how many clients I had every
Yeah.
month. I can send them invoices, receipts, and again, I can do my charting. I can send them files. So it's really my one-stop shop. That's where my schedule is every day. And then you can also get, pretty fancy with it. You can have different types of sessions. So as I progressed throughout the year, so when I first started, I made my catchment really wide. I'm up here, in Simcoe and Barrie. And so I would make different slots for, okay, a Barrie client versus an Angus client versus a Midland client. And so I would know sort of where I was going each day. And then yes.
Do you mean that you would have a day assigned for those different regions?
So I would start doing that informally and just sort of eyeball that. And then pretty soon I was able to say, you know what, I have a good amount of Angus. So I'm actually going to have these 2 days that are going to be Angus and these 2 days. And I actually sent a survey out to my clients at a certain point, and I said, I am going to be having very specific days for specific locations. Please tell me which days work best for you. And I kind of designed that in that way. And then on the Jane platform, you can actually use what's called tags, and you can make it for their self-booking that if they're going to, book Angus, that it's only open on those
That
2 days
day.
on that,
Yeah.
right? So that's really helpful.
So you use online booking. Now, do you have online booking for initial assessments or just for follow-ups for existing clients? Because Jane has many great features, but this is one thing about Jane is you can't separate by existing client and new client.
New client.
Whereas with some of the other platforms you can. Some you can only accept online booking from existing clients, which a lot of therapists like because the intake can sometimes be a little bit longer and less predictable.
Yes. And so I have it that it's only for follow-up sessions that clients can book for. And my process is when anyone would like to begin services with me, I begin with a 15-minute discovery call free. And that is something that at this point they have to contact me for, and then I arrange. I did have some self-booking for that, but I've sort of shifted that. From there, because we're on the call, we then arrange when that initial is on the call, or we email around that. So that's something I can turn off in Jane, that they can only access follow-up sessions. And I make that really clear to them.
And is your online booking on the website or is it a link that you send to them later?
Yeah, so there is a direct link on my website.
There is? Okay, I didn't see that, yeah.
Click on it. And then, it says like book now, it says existing clients, new clients. And I sort of have some processes in there so that they know, and then all my sessions are called follow-up session, right? So they know it's a follow-up session, and I explain that to them during the discovery call as well. And what's really important about that for me, especially at this stage, is that I do have a bit of a wait list. So when I have that discovery call, I talk with them about that and I put them on the wait list. And then if I take someone off the wait list, then we arrange that initial session.
So they'll call you, you'll do the call, and then if they need to go on the wait, so you'll do the call regardless of whether or not
I will.
You have a space for them.
I do, and I give them option because most of the time I just get an email directly from my website that someone's inquiring. And then I let them know, okay, thank you for inquiring. Our next step would be this 15-minute call. And I also say, just so you know, my wait list is this long at this time. These are the options. Let me know if you're interested in booking a discovery call. And then if they then have a choice of saying, oh, their wait list is that long, forget it, I'm not even going to bother with this call. But then I do say, if you want to be added to the wait list, we'll do a discovery call. And that gives me information because the wait list can vary depending on what area they're in, what their availability. If they're saying, oh, I'm up in Midland and I can only do 4:30, their wait list is going to be longer than saying, hey, I'm right here in Barrie, I can do a 12 o'clock appointment, right?
So how do you coordinate your follow-ups around travel time if someone's booking themselves?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Because that is always a complication when it comes to OT community booking.
Absolutely. And so right now I have brought my catchment in smaller and smaller. So right now I see clients only Barrie, Angus, and Innisfil, also virtual. I have a couple clients that I still do see a little further, but I have very designated days that I coordinate with them. And then for the self bookings, it is individuals that are sort of in Angus or Barrie, and I have those targeted days. So if they do that self booking, it has to be on one of those days that tagged. In the software, you can put in sort of buffer times, right?
Buffer for
So
travel.
if I know I have an Angus day, right? That, I have that half hour afterwards. I can get anywhere in Angus in half an hour. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I sort of do that piece. The other part that I would love to see as an automatic thing in Jane, which I've seen a lot of people say, but I still have to do manually, is to turn off booking after you get to a certain amount of appointments per day. So I don't like doing more than 3 on the road visits per day at this point. And so I always am looking at my calendar, and if I see it, then I turn the booking off so that I don't get bombarded with having too full of a day.
Right.
And so,
Okay.
okay, now I don't think we've talked about the marketing piece. So, how are you finding your clients, or how are they finding you? And I'm wondering, I mean, we've got a lot of nice stuff online. So, are you investing in any like search engine optimization pieces through Google? Let's talk a little bit about that, Shauna.
Great. Excellent question. And this is sort of where I say, from a business perspective, I've been very fortunate that there is a high need. The
Yeah.
need is there for
There's a
OT.
very high need for OTPs right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
it's a very high need, and I say that from a business perspective. From an OT,
Yes.
my OT heart perspective, it kind of
Yes.
breaks my heart sometimes when I come
Sure.
across clients who have been waiting, and I wish that wasn't the case.
Right.
I truly do. That being said, it is. I found out very early that the need is quite high. And I was very prepared to see what kind of things I needed to do for marketing. Do I need to do, promote a social media campaigns? What will I need to do? My strategy started first, I made my website. I connected a lot with my existing network just to let people know that that's what I'm doing, right? And then I also really wanted to connect with the community that I'm in. So a lot of my previous OT experience was in Toronto or York region. But as I said, I was starting this business in Barrie and Simcoe. So that I didn't have a lot of my professional network here. So I really had to start that part from scratch. And that's the part I prioritized. So that was me reaching out and really exploring the different services that are available. And that helped me, from a referral marketing perspective, but also I think it's important if you're serving a client in an area to know the services so you can refer and you can inform as well. So I connected with to see like who the different SLPs were.
okay.
I connected with a community nonprofit organizations. I connected with the libraries. So a few different areas. And between doing that, I built a network here.
So, and was your contact with them just sort of saying, "Hey, I'm an OT who's going to be doing peds and is building up a practice. Would you like to chat?" Or how did you open the door to those conversations? Because it is a cold call, right?
Yeah, it is. And that's why I really tried to focus on quality versus quantity. I didn't send out blanket emails to 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
I set up sort of an Instagram and was like, well, who's doing what? And then I would send an email or I would send a message. I would say, hey, this is who I am. I'm starting up a practice here. I would love to get to know more about your services, actually. There's more
Yeah.
about that. And that's really genuine. If for nothing else, I want to know who I can refer people to. And so I would reach out, to a local SLP and say, hey, I see you have a clinic. I would love to come by and just say hi, learn a little bit about your services, let you know what I have going on, and just so we can connect. And that was essential, and that did really well. So I went for a lot of coffee dates. And it was really nice actually, because so many of these practitioners I connected with on that business level too, of when they started a business and all, and they said, this is great. I wish I connected with people more. And that was really fruitful too, because I did get referrals. And then I began to build a name for myself. And so many opportunities came from that in terms of I began doing some consultations at one of the speech clinics, and I've done presentations with the town of Innisfil. And I've done a collaborative group through a grant with the Barrie Public Library, and starting another program. So that wasn't the end goal for any of these reach outs. It really was to connect and understand the community and where they're at. And it really did confirm that there was such a need, because everyone I meet with would say, oh, thank goodness. Okay, I have
Right.
20 people I want to send to you, or all these sorts of pieces that I would hear.
And Shauna, that makes me think, through these conversations, did it help you then hone your services or what you were going to offer? Or, did you have a vision going in saying, I'm going to offer this breadth of service? But through these conversations, did you fine tune it or change it? Is it evolving now? Can you share that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question and completely true. When I began the practice, I sort of frame it as pediatrics and or mental health. And it still is that type of practice, where I see kids for very core pediatric, sensory, fine motor, all those pieces. And then I even see adults from the psychotherapy realm. But my favorite personally is when the two intersect, and I get to do the emotional regulation and the child psychotherapy and all those pieces too. The balance of that is what has shifted over time, and what has emerged from those conversations, Seema, is certainly the community has presented a strong need for support for the autism community. And I know that this is
Yeah.
across the board. And so while it wasn't a specific intention of mine, I certainly at the beginning, and I would say still now, have a large amount of my caseload of autistic individuals. And that is from a support need. That's also from a funding access. While there are challenges with autism funding, when people do receive funding and they say, okay, we can do these weekly sessions, and they have that consistent access as well. So that was sort of not an intentional focus, but something that had become more of a focus as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of practical follow-up questions to the things that we've been talking about over the past little while, just because I know that we don't have a ton of time. So I'm going to ask you sort of really specific questions.
Okay, let's go rapid fire.
There's just a
Fire
couple.
question.
There's just a couple. So one is, at the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about how you started writing a to-do list of all the things you needed to do. So the question is, how did you know the things you needed to do
Yeah.
to write
And
the list in the first place?
absolutely. Googling.
Okay.
Just Googling.
And what did you Google? I want to start a business. What do I do?
Yeah,
ChatGPT, help me.
Yeah, I hadn't even jumped into the AI world yet, although I'm sure that would have been very helpful a year ago. But starting an OT business in Ontario, right? Seeing OSOT resources that were
There's
there.
a lot of resources. Yeah.
That was great. That was really helpful. And I would be so remiss if I didn't take a moment to highlight my network and the other OTs that I connected with. I have a very close OT friend who as well started a private practice business, in a similar time frame. And it was so amazing to have these conversations with her. My very first referral came from her wait list. That's where my first referral came from.
Yeah.
So that support from my OT network. And how did you run that? So I did connect with a few OTs that had their own businesses too. I looked at other OT websites to help design mine. What are the sections they had? What do I like? What do I feel is not necessary for me? So really, a lot of it was connecting with my network, doing some targeted Googling, OSOT resources, to really, and my list kept growing. As I would talk to people, they'd lead me somewhere else, and I'd keep on adding.
So Shauna, did you build your own website, or did you hire someone to do it?
I built my own website.
Okay. And you know what? It's actually, for those people who are like, oh, it's actually not that bad. Once you get into it's achievable for sure. Okay, but I'm going to ask more questions.
It is. And I just want to make a side note about the website thing too, is I agree. It's not that difficult. I connected with a family member who has Design Forte, who gave me recommendations about how to go about it and what platforms to use.
Right.
And then I would go back to her afterwards and say, does this look professional? And she'd give me coloring advice too.
Oh,
So,
yes. And I should specify, I'm talking about the ability to slap something up there.
oh, yes,
I'm
you
not
can.
talking about the true skilled website building, which is
Fancy
a whole
design.
different thing.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
talking like, here's my face, this is my bio, it's up.
I'm up and running. Yeah.
That can be super easy. Yeah.
So, Shauna, how specifically do you accept payment?
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
use like Stripe and a credit card? Do you do e-transfers? What do you do?
So primarily e-transfers, that is
Okay.
definitely my preferred way. That's just easy for everyone. On the Jane platform, they do have a spot for credit card. I do collect credit card, and that I really just use for no payment or late payment. And I
Okay.
also add a processing fee, which you're available to add up to a certain amount. I believe it's 2.4% that you can charge. And that supports your payment of the processing fee for because if you're processing it through Jane, you have to pay an amount as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And then so you had just commented about the no-shows and so on, which brought up the other question. Do you have everybody's credit card on file and you auto bill for no-shows, like cancellations, that kind of a thing?
So I have everyone's credit card on file for sure. That's a requirement. I do not automatically charge. I send reminders. So 24 hours after, I'll usually send a reminder, and usually it's a whoopsie, and they send
Yeah.
it right away, and that's fine. If I find it's been a few days, or if it's by the end of the week or Friday, then I go in, and I also then have to adjust the amount that I'm billing because I'm adding that late processing fee. And then I put it through the credit card.
Okay. The next one in my rapid fire was materials, because especially with peds, there's a lot of materials that you have to prep with, right? The rest of the stuff, you show up with your briefcase and a pen or a keyboard or whatever. Peds is different. Now, and you kind of had to take a gamble on that from a cost wise, because you need the resources before you have the clients.
Yeah, it's that's always such an interesting thing to develop materials, right? So I have my trunk and my trunk organizer. I have my key things, because I do have a history of working in peds. I do know sort of what was useful, what wasn't. I always say I'm a Dollarama OT. It's most of my stuff, because it is okay if it gets broken, and if a kid really likes it, I love telling a family, hey, this works. Go to Dollarama and get it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there are a couple things that sometimes you spend more money on, but it's a slippery slope. And I think it's only if you're really focused in on something. And I would say, yes, I bought some things at the outset, but you get as you go too, and
Yeah.
you see what kind of clients you have. And I'm telling you, even a session that I had yesterday, I was explaining a really important mental concept, and I just pulled out my pen and I'm showing my pen. So, a lot of times, as we know with OTs, it's never, it's not always just the materials you use, it's always how you use them, right? So I try not to get too overwhelmed by having, there's no magical materials. My magical materials are painter's tape, markers, whiteboards, fidget toys, different things like that. But certainly I have a nice trunk full of things that I've built over time.
Okay, so it wasn't a huge, the primary investment was time, not finances.
Yeah.
Last one of my quick questions. Developing things like consents and templates, if you were writing reports and so on, what resources did you use? How did you go about building those? And for those who aren't familiar with practice management software, there's always resources within the practice management software, which is a secure platform, which I don't think we specified earlier. So Euro, for as long as you choose well, you can choose something that's fully compliant with all of the legislation. But there's a lot of adaptability in terms of what you build. So template wise. So what did you do? Where'd you get your resources?
Yeah, again, it was seeing the existing templates that they had.
Mm-hmm.
also, I think, because I worked in management and admin and those, I do have a sense of building these types of documents as well and what are important things. I definitely went on Kodo and saw, what are the requirements? They have some good information there. And really, it was a lot of reflective practice of building, some people had their consents on their websites. I would look at other people's consents. And really a lot of adjustment and fine tuning. And even now I'll have things where, I should add this, right?
Yeah.
And really there's the informed consent. There's also things like talking about using home space as therapeutic space and the expectations around that, and everything from keeping it safe, no substances that cause any harm, all those sorts of things, that it's a safe therapeutic space, or that I may ask a parent to leave a space, and like all these pieces that sort of develop over time and as you're doing things. But really, I rely heavily on that because that is my safeguard. That is my protection to make sure that I'm set up for success. And I do ask people to look at those consents carefully so they understand the scope of the service, the risks, benefits, and really what things might look like, as well as those logistical pieces around canceling within 24 hours, payment expectations.
And I did notice, because we've used a few different clinic management tools over the years, and something, now the others may be doing this now too, but something that's nice, Ian Jane, is in the initial intake questionnaire, it automatically has cancellation, no shows, all that kind of stuff at the end. Because I don't know about you, actually charging for your services is challenging for a lot of healthcare providers, just emotionally challenging.
It
I
really
mean,
is,
sorry, Shauna, I was just going to say that money mindset is definitely a topic that we've addressed with some of our other podcast guests, and sort of that incongruency, I think, for OTs, leading with your OT heart you talked about, and how do I take that and charge for my services? And as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the things we didn't cover, Shari. Do you have a business plan now? Do you have an evolving, do you have policies?
Yes.
But I am cognizant of time. And so in just thinking about kind of a nice way to package this up and wrap it up, Shauna, I've got two questions for you. So one is, tell me the hardest thing about running your own business, and then tell me the best thing about running your own business. Let's start with the hardest and end with the best.
Okay, excellent. I think the hardest thing is you are on your own.
Mhm.
And so
Despite OSOT supporting you, I
that's
hear
right.
you.
That's right. And so 100%. And so constantly being in this space of reflection and balance, and am I doing the right thing? All these sorts of pieces. Should I be doing more of this and that? And so um the always thinking, right? You're on your own, you're figuring it out, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah.
But that ties exactly with the best thing about
Okay.
it, is that it's you. It's your
Yeah.
business. You get to
Yeah.
make it what you want it to be, and it gets to evolve with you in terms of your flexibility, and you get to say yes to things, and you get to say no to things. And so I think it's the worst and the best of it. But I am so thrilled that I took this leap. I didn't know how it was going to go, and I couldn't be happier that I did make the step.
Well, I think that we're really, really pleased with you coming on the show and sharing a little bit of your journey with us. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
Yeah, I think just if you're thinking that you want to do it, I know I jumped in full force, but many people start small and start seeing clients. I think that's a lovely way to go. Um, but just connect with your resources. We know the OT community is strong and wonderful. And I certainly could not have done it without connecting with mentors, supervisors, different people in the community that I'd never met before. So while it might feel lonely at times or you're unsure, connect with your resources, because there are always people who are there and happy and willing to share their insights, myself included, always happy to connect with anyone who has any questions.
Thank you. That's lovely,
Thank you,
Shauna. Thank
Shauna.
you for connecting with us. It's been such a pleasure. We wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having the conversation.
Thank you, Shauna.
Loved all the practical tips from Shauna during our conversation. She mentioned some great resources too that you can find listed in our episode description. Next week's episode is a unique one. We'll have 3 guests that talk about the F word of business, franchising. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe now and share this podcast with your colleagues.